Well, I'm pretty much as ready as ever.
All right.
I even went over this stuff with Rocky earlier, just to make sure I brushed up on it.
Oh, no.
Rocky just
Poor
listened.
Rock.
Uh-huh.
Poor Rocky.
The man was probably playing BDO, listening to ESO lore again. You mean like catching people up on their enlightenment?
Theoretically.
Wait a minute. Who needs to be enlightened?
Oh, nobody here. I think everyone's enlightenment's burned through except for Battle
I just got on. Yeah, I've been playing Skyrim for the past week, dude.
How dare you play Skyrim?
Bro, it is modded to hell and back, and it is fun.
I'm pretty sure he's even got ESO mods on it.
Yes, I do, actually.
Yeah. Tonight's topic, Dawn Era. The fun era.
It's actually the most boring era. But we gotta get through it to get to the rest of the stuff. There's more than two because the Red Guards have their version too, with Sitcall and everything.
True.
But the two most canonized versions are the
Human
high elf
and the
side of it
Mer.
and the human, yeah. Or I'm not even high elf, the Altamer, not the Altamer, the Altamer, the original elves.
Yeah. We're doing
But-
good. We're gonna have a nice lore discussion tonight, though. We got Battle Roar over to my left, Admiral over to my right. And this is pretty much their night where they get to, discuss and tell us about ESO's history and lore.
Yeah,
Oh,
not-
you made a mistake.
Not really just ESO either. Because eventually we'll get into stuff that bleeds into their other games. This is just the most early installment. That's the thing. There's a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff leads up to. Yeah, for now, I guess they could do one earlier. Granted, this is second era. If we went back to, there's not a lot that happens in the first era, really. Crazy stuff, at least. But they always go back and make lore, so they could just make something crazy up, I guess. Like, we didn't know about the Three Banners War until this game came out. And then once they created the Aldemary Dominion in this game, they had to create that. Oh no, by the way, this is the first Aldemary Dominion. There were like 3 of them. So, self-correcting lore.
Yeah, we went from, oh, hey, look at this. There's like one Ultimary Dominion. And that's the one that we know from Skyrim, to,
Yeah.
there's like 5. Don't worry. Don't worry about it. We'll explain later.
But they're always the High Elves, the Wood Elves, and the Kashyyyks. Because the High Elves always pull some backhanded crap to get them all to unite. Like in Skyrim, it was because they lied and said they put the moons back. But
And then
Another
they just kind
story-
of hit political control over the Wood Elves.
yeah, well, I mean, yeah. When your house is flammable, a bunch of mages really don't look like a good thing to fight. But all that lore is not to be saved for another day because Dawn Era, it covers mostly the gods and the original stuff. Stuff that we take for granted a lot of times because, being in the game now, you just hear characters talking about the gods as they perceive them. But in the Dawn Era, in the beginning of the lore, is literally the cluster screw fest that is the creation of all those gods and how all of them came about. And some of them came about in some pretty crazy ways, which shows they may be more powerful than we initially think. The power level in the Dawn Era is just absolutely nuts. With some of the deities that are created and destroyed, and and still are on Tamriel that no one talks about, because there are a few of those around, kind of the unnamed gods. So I guess the simplest place to start with all of it would be at the very beginning of the Dawn Age, and that's when you had your two forces, which they weren't good and evil, because good and evil are ways of thinking, and you just had Anu and Padme with the names of the Force, Anu and Padme, and they were in
Everybody
constant
calls
conflict.
them Padme. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Padme, something. Either way, they were just two forces that were in constant conflict. And the way it's written, you imagine Anu as the good force and Padme as the bad force, but there was just really no good and evil at that point, so you really can't make that assumption. But yeah, so those were your two original forces that were in the universe that created everything, and they created the universe on accident, which is interesting, because in the lore. And I probably should preface all this by, I enjoy reading the lore, and I am very versed in lore, but I am no lore master, so I could get stuff wrong from time to time. But after one of their conflicts, their blood was spilled, and from their blood was created everything, creation. And them being just forces, they did not understand what they had done. And in the way the lore puts it, in order to better understand what they had created, they birthed their souls. And that happens a couple times before we get to the gods that we know now. The first time they birthed their souls, Anu gave birth to Anuiel. Not Ariel, Anuiel. This is one step above Ariel. And Padme gave birth to Sithis, which is the void, which is the nothingness. And it's funny because we have cultures that worship Sithis, but we don't have any cultures that worship Anuiel. They always start one step below Anuiel, which is closer to the gods that we know now. But we have cultures that actually worship Sithis, and organizations like the Dark Brotherhood worship Sithis. The Argonians worship Sithis. Even the Argonians that worship the Hist inherently worship Sithis as well, because the Hist views Sithis as the supreme deity. And the Hist venerates Sithis, not on a way that they worship him, but they recognize that you don't mess with Sithis. Which is odd, because at that point, when it's Anuiel and Sithis, they're still kind of ideas. They're not gods that are sentient, like Akatosh and Mara, or like the Daedra, like Molag Bal or Dagon. They still don't quite understand what's going on, which is why they then birth their souls, which gives birth to the gods that we know nowadays. Anuiel gave birth to Ariel, which is Akatosh. Depending on what culture you're in, Akatosh, Alkosh, the dragon god of time, the head deity of the 9 divines, or 8 divines in this game, and whether or not you see Talos as a legit divine, but another discussion. And then Sithis gives birth to Lorcan. And Lorcan ends up being the catalyst for a lot of what goes on Tamriel. It has went on since. Because Lorcan is the dead god. He is no longer around. But he would have been Akatosh's equal, essentially, in the Pantheon scale of things. And then all the other gods come from Akatosh and Lorcan, essentially, be it Adric or Daedric. And at this point, you still don't have good and evil. We think Akatosh nowadays is good and Lorcan is evil. Well, there are cultures that venerate Lorcan. The Nords venerate Lorcan. They just give him a different name. His name is Shor in the Nordic pantheon. Lorcan is seen by the Imperials and certain sects of Bretons as the ancestor of men. But that's because of what happens after they start hanging out on Nirn for a while, and Lorcan kind of gets the idea of hey, let's do something with this something that we have created. And I'm gonna pause there and let let Admiral kind of speak up, see if he's got anything, because I've been talking for a hot minute about just the beginning.
So, the one thing that we should probably mention over here is the fact that all of this is not one-sided. Like real life, there's a literal shit ton of stories that do everything differently. Where, if we go back to Aniel in Sithis over there, Sithis is supposed to be the quote-unquote force of chaos. Same with Anu being the force of order. But most people will be like, well, Anu's the bad or the good one when it comes to this religion. For example, most of the elves will be doing that. But Nords, their precursor race, the Needs, they will all see Sithis as the good guy. Same with Lorcan being named Shore. There is multiple different canons depending on where you are in that Sid world.
You have the races that don't recognize either. Like the Red Guards don't recognize either. They recognize Setikal as the beginning of everything, their serpent god. Which, funny enough, has parallels to Alduin. Which, Alduin was an ancient god. He wasn't just a dragon like he was in Skyrim. He's actually a god. He's the world devourer, which lines up with Redguard. So really, a lot of these theologies and ways of thinking clash, but they all intertwine to some extent. It's kind of like in real life. Not one person ever has the full story. Normally, it's a conglomerate from all the stories that is closer to the truth. You know. And the part I'm giving, the part that I subscribe to in Elder Scrolls canon. It's probably the more orderly part of it, because it can get really hard to understand if you start delving into some of the other more obscure ways of thinking, like the Argonians, because the Argonians weren't created by the gods; they were created by the Hist, and then you got to get into what's the Hist, and then you get into all kinds of.
In one theory, they were born at just the start of the world in general, and then another theory, which is the most accepted theory, is they're a part of the Wandering Elnofe, which we haven't got there yet.
If you talk to Hist, what are they called? Hist speakers? At least in this game, if you talk to Hist speakers or Hist tenders, they tell you that the Argonians at one point were just lizards. Until they drank of the Hist sap and became what we now know as the Argonians. But then you got to go and say, well, that freaking Hist sap, if you're any other race other than Argonian, it has some pretty serious side effects, and they're not good. Which, then you got to get into, well, what the crap is the Hist sap? What are the Hist? Where did the Hist come from? And that's part of some of the gods thing, because, in my mind, at least, the Hist have shown time and time again they're on that god level because of some of the stuff they've pulled off throughout history in this game and in the other games. But we should probably back up before we start talking about individual gods to how all the gods came about from Akatosh and from Lorcan, because that kind of lays the foundation for everything. Because at this point, so Akatosh and Lorcan are floating around, creation has been created, but there's no design to creation yet. It's still undesigned, which gives Lorcan the idea to, hey, let's make something out of this creation.
Well, also you also got to remember during this time, at this moment when Akatosh is born, time is made.
Yes, you're correct, because it was timeless before this.
Yes. There was no time. It was just existence.
And with him being kind of born, we had the situation of the chaos and order kind of came together with time actually becoming a thing. So other, what is called Adada, or just gods in general, started to form with own identities. Like, for example, one's going to be the god of war, the god of mission, that type of stuff that you always see, where they all have their own titles.
Yeah. So where Akatosh and Lorcan were kind of the strongest of the new gods, there were a lot of new gods. Mephala and Boethia were created at this point. Some canons say RK was, but then some canons say RK was not created. He was a shopkeeper from like the first era that got turned into a god. So you just have conflicting stories, but we know for sure a lot of the Daedric princes, Mephala, Boethia, Namira, some of those old ancient presences that a lot of the tribes of and a lot of the cultures of Tamriel view as evil, they were created at this point. Molag Bal and Mehrunes Dagon were created at this point. And then you have your Aedra, Mara, Stendar were created at this point. Trinimac, I said Malakath, Axe Malakath, because he's still Trinimac at this point. He's still an Aedra. You have a lot of, and Trinimac was he the shield bearer of Ariel or something like that? He was like Ariel's right hand man, essentially.
Yeah, he was basically the general of everything.
Yeah.
Where if you needed somebody to fight and win, Trinimac was your god.
Yeah, he was the god of it wasn't war, but it was essentially war. It was like orderly war or righteous war and fury. But yeah, so we get back to Lorcan, and Lorcan, this is where a lot of some of the races view him as evil. He decides to create creation, and of course he can't do it alone because he's not powerful enough. At this point, they're a couple steps down from the ancient forces that created something, but they're still very powerful, but they're not powerful enough to do it all on their own. So some of them call it tricked, some of them call it persuaded. Some of the gods back then to help create Nirn, what our characters live on in all the games. Because you have 3 levels. You have Nirn, which is where humanity and elvish kind,
the mortal realm of Mundus.
And at this point, Oblivion hasn't been created yet. It's just Mundus. Mundus is about to be created, and then you had Aetherius, which is where all the gods hang out. So I'm gonna go with tricked because that's what the word's using most. He tricked these gods into helping him create Mundus, and they didn't read the fine print because in creating something like this, it drains your power. It drains your power a lot. Killed many gods, just straight out when they gave their power. Some of the weaker old gods were straight out killed. You had gods that rebelled and said no. Those would become the Daedra. That's why Daedra in Elvish tongue literally means not our ancestors, because they refused to help create Tamriel.
And then you have the ones who said, wait a minute, we don't want to lose our power, and then fled.
Yeah,
led by the Lord of Magnus.
Yeah, he was the architect. Yeah, so Magnus actually contributed quite a bit of power to creating Tamriel, but he realized what was happening. In the lore, he's referred to as the architect of Nirn. So he had to have been at the foundation. He realized what was happening, though, and like you said, he fled. And a lot of what are other gods known as Magnagi fled with him. And when they left, they tore a hole through Mundus, which created the sun, moon, and stars. And it's through those that the magicka comes into the world, through those holes that he left. That's why in lore, most magic feeds off of the sun. Because when the sun's out, though, that's the whole Magnus made, and Magnus kind of is the big daddy of all magic. So there were some that fled. The Daedra left and said, screw you, we're going to do our own thing, created Oblivion, and then they each made their pocket realms. But a lot of the Aedra, which again, Daedra means not our ancestors, Aedra means our ancestors. So the Aedra gave a lot of their power to create Nirn, therefore they're the ancestors of everyone, technically. Or they're the reason we're here. The Aedra kind of got mad at Lorcan because he kind of tricked them. Didn't tell him how much it was going to cost.
Kind of said, alright, no, you're done. And then immediately ripped out his heart.
Well, there was a big war fought, yeah. And this is where Trinimac becomes Malakath, because Mephala and Boethia freaking RKO 1-2 combo him. Really underhanded underhandedly, as is both of those gods' typical MO. But Tremac was about to kill Boethia, which is crazy to think that, at this point, it's pretty much impossible to kill some people in PvP in Cyrodiil, so you imagine just trying to kill a god. But, he was about to kill, I think it was Boethia. I'm pretty sure it was Boethia, and Mephala snuck up behind him and shanked him in the back, and then, as per the the canon the orcs don't accept, at least, is then Boethia devoured him and crapped him out, and he became Malakath, the Scorned One. So he was corrupted, and what's cool, so we're kind of getting into the individual gods here, so if you parallel Trinamac's beliefs with Malakath's beliefs, they're very similar still, even though Malakath is technically a Daedra now. And this is how you get the orcs. So the orcs were elves, followers of Trinamac. Trinamac, bam, gets destroyed. Bam, becomes Malakath. All his followers, all his devout followers, get transformed into the Orsimer, the orcs, at this point. And then, like Mork said, during this war, Akatosh gets a good shot in at Lorcan and actually kills him. And rips his heart out, puts it on the end of his bow, Oriel's bow, the same bow we get in Skyrim. That is an Aedric artifact, which are incredibly rare because there weren't many Aedric artifacts made like the Daedric artifacts. Takes his heart out, puts it on the end of the bow, shoots it, and it lands in what is now Morrowind in Red Mountain. Red Mountain forms around the heart, the volcano. So,
tells you how powerful heart is if it makes not only the mountain, but the entire island of Vardenfell.
Yeah, because that pretty much is the whole volcanic island. So, and this is the point in which, and I read this earlier, I didn't realize this. Sheogorath, or Yagalag at this point, was not around. He wasn't one of the originals. He was created when Lorcan bled and lost his divine spark. He was created from the blood and the divine spark of Lorcan, which shows how grossly powerful he would have been in his heyday before he was corrupted into Sheogorath.
All right.
Which is kind of spooky. But
kind of shows you why he F's around so much.
Which yeah.
If he still retained that power in modern day, nobody would F with him.
Well, that's why the Daedra got together and turned him into Sheogorath, probably. Because they realized how powerful he was.
But then if we're talking about Dawn Age, we should talk about a certain tentacly boy killing off an unnamed one.
Yeah, and that's a new lore we've got.
Yeah, that's some of the new lore that we just said, wait a minute. That's cool. Yeah. We have an unnamed Daedric lord that got killed and literally consumed for power over here by a certain somebody we meet in Skyrim.
Trying to find out. He had a name. I cannot remember the name that the other god did.
But I'm talking about Hermaeus Mora right now. And Hermaeus Mora, the knowledge. The knowledge of all.
And we even get a reference over to Miraak over there. If I scroll back enough.
Yeah, so essentially this whole Dawn era is just gods murdering gods.
It is full on Game of Thrones between the gods.
Yeah. So, and this leads to my speculation. We'll have to do this one. We'll have to have me and Admiral rank what we think the order of the power of all the gods are, Daedra and Aedra, because that could be a fun discussion. But my number one strongest Daedra, I believe, is Hermaeus Mora. You just don't see it because he doesn't have the same ambitions that Molag Bal, Mehrunes Dagon, and all those have.
His only ambition is to grab knowledge, and that is it. Though, we do have a funny thing that we do get in the new expansion that I've been told of, which is just hilarious. And it's not even from the expansion itself, it's more the Twitter account becoming Hermaeus Mora for a minute. There's apparently so many books, like, for example, you know which one I'm talking about over there. The Lusty Argonian Maid. Apparently, there's so many books that he's collected about that type of stuff that is what holds up his realm of entire book islands.
Oh, God.
That is what's keeping it above water.
Wow.
Yeah, so...
That makes sense, though.
Thank you, ESO Twitter account, for making this information, because damn, it's good.
The smut,
it's the Twitter account.
The smut of Tamriel keeps Flora's realm above water.
All those
That's all you need to know.
fanfics about Serana and Farkas. But yeah, so Hermaeus Mora, and you really see, so he's not a guy that goes out of his way to kill gods, or anyone for that matter. But he went out of his way to kill this god, and it's worth mentioning because it has some pretty big implications. I'm a big lore guy when it comes to the new DLC drops in ESO. That's the first thing I do. I go play them. The implication there is that god was the god of essentially screwing up fate. He could change fate. And Hermaeus Mora, being the Daedric prince of fate and forbidden knowledge, couldn't have that. And to show you how powerful Hermaeus Mora actually was, and probably still is, because this is still Dawn era, he calls Periite and Vermina together. And this is in the DLC, you can go play it. And says, hey, this other Daedric prince is screwing stuff up. He's messing with fate, and we cannot do that. Because fate, he puts it, if fate, you do something with fate, it'll pretty much unravel Tamriel. So, yeah, like it all the weave and all that stuff. And Periite and Vermina go, we don't care. And so he goes, well, guess what? You cannot care, and now you're not going to remember this meeting. So, until this game, Periite and Vermina forgot that meeting even happened. So, what? 2,000-3,000 years? He kept it secret from them? He kept the secret so well that Hermaeus Mora himself almost forgot it happened. He almost forgot what was in the runed cube that had the runic that had the information. So that shows you how powerful he is if he can hide information even from himself. So yeah, and that's one of the cool little happenings that we just have recently got that happened in the Dawn era. But yeah, and there I wanted to mention too real quick. There was a third kind of god during this time that all their power was drained pretty much, but they decided instead of fleeing with the Magnagy and Magnus, they would stay behind and nurture Nirn, and those are known as the Earthbones. They're Elnathay, old Elnathay that are left behind, and we get to talk to some of them in the Glenumbra quest line in the base game. We meet a few of the Earthbones. In some of the Druid quest lines, we get to talk to a couple of the old Elnathay during some of the Druid quests. So they can be manipulated. They don't have a ton of power anymore, but they still remain to nurture Nirn and make sure Tamriel stays alive, essentially. And there's a lot of them. So those were gods that literally gave up everything and are still here that are nurturing Tamriel. Which is interesting, because even the Aedra technically fled what the people worship. So, yeah, just that's another little interesting tidbit that I had retched into my recesses of my mind to grab today to talk about.
Should we go into a couple of the current 8 deities?
We can. Really, the problem with the Aedra is that they don't interact with mortals too much. And that is because a lot of their power was drained. But they're still very powerful, right? They're still not weak. It's seen multiple times, like in Oblivion, where Akatosh lends his power to Martin Septim, and Martin Septim backhands Mehrunes Dagon. So those gods are still not unpowerful. They just don't have anything to do with Tamriel for the most part. They're mostly hands off.
Except for just worship. That's more of...
The most that any of the Aedra have ever tampered with Tamriel was Akatosh giving Saint Alessia the Red Diamond.
Yeah.
That's it. There are boons those gods bestow, technically, but that's not... I mean, the Daedra do that, and the Daedra enjoy screwing with people, so we know a lot more about the Daedra than we do the Aedra. Just for the fact that the Daedra like screwing with the mortal realm, where the Aedra are more hands-off on their approach to stuff. But yeah, so we can go into some of the gods that were around back then that aren't Aedra or Daedra, like Alduin. Alduin was the first child of Akatosh. He's the balancing force. He's the world devourer. And in some lore, he devoured the last Caliper, so this one would happen. And we can get into Calipers. Calipers are crazy. Because they're canon, they're real. But then you're getting into like alternate timelines, timeline splicing, like all kinds of fun stuff. And at this point, too, in the first era, a dragon break occurs, with the first dragon break. And that's not where dragons run rampant. That is where time fractures and two realities become one, essentially. And that's why I say you can probably link credence to a lot of the origin stories from a lot of the different cultures, because there was a dragon break in the early Dawn era. So multiple things are probably true at the same time. As far as the gods go, some of the earliest gods would have been like Dagon and Mephala and Boethia and Mara. Kinnereth would have been very ancient as well, because Kine being Kinnereth's original name, which is one of my favorite Elder Scrolls deities. I don't like Kinnereth, I prefer Kine, being a Nord main and everything. But she is, at least in Nordic pantheon, the handmaiden of Shor, which sounds weird because Shor is Lorcan. So that just leads more credence to, really, there's no good and evil at this point. There's just, screw you, I'm a god. There's no good and bad. And Kinnereth was thought to have created the original Nords, which predate the Needs, which they later became the Needs. But Kinnereth created the Nordic people, by breathing onto the third of the world. And they were created from the snowdrifts on the third of the world. And then as they went down from there, they would become the Needs. Then the Needs would split. Half of them would go back to Atmora, which is where the Nords we know now come from. And the other half would move to the Heartland and ultimately get enslaved by the Heartland Elves. So Kine
or
is
the Aliens.
Yeah, the Heartland Elves, the Aliens. The very brutal race of elves. Even more so than the High Elves.
The race of elves that we could take 40 to 50 minutes talking about just on its own.
Yeah. Yeah, but Kinnereth is a lot of times viewed as the antithesis of humankind. She breathed life into the human side of things. Which is partially why the elves don't like the humans as much. Because in Elven canon, they were some of the fallen gods that lost their power when they created Tamriel.
They were a part of the Elnathay that basically just started breeding down into history before becoming the original precursor race to all of the elves.
Yeah, which is the Aldmer, not a T, a D. Aldmer.
Then eventually everybody started dissipating into different areas, going, for example, towards Morrowind, where we had the Chimer and then the Dark Elves.
Yeah, after the Chimer did something really stupid.
The dwarves just saying, you know what? F your religions, and then going away.
Well, yeah, they tried to become gods.
Which I still say they are definitely the case of, if they did not get deleted off of this planet, they would have ruled it. Because, my god.
Yeah, and they were pretty brutal, too. They weren't crazy brutal, but they weren't nice. And a little side note about the dwarves. The funny thing about the dwarves, they're like, screw you, we're going to become our own gods. The dwarves were atheists, essentially. They didn't believe in the gods. The loading screen from Skyrim, I remember this because I love this loading screen. It says the dwarves rebuked the gods of Tamriel and instead revered their gods of wisdom and logic, which is probably why they were so far advanced compared to everyone. But yeah, they found the Heart of Lurkin, and I'll give them brownie points for that. But they tried to tap it, and who knows, tapped it wrong. I guess tapped it wrong because it gets tapped again in the early First Era and creates 3 gods. So, I guess Kagrenak just did it wrong. I don't know.
It's either he did it wrong, or the fact that they didn't believe in the gods, trying to use a literal relic from a god, kind
that could
of
be true too. That could be true too.
effed them over in the long run there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because actually it made 4 gods, not 3. Was Dagoth a god?
Dagoth was technically a god, but he was more of a, bitch, I'll come back if you kill me. Oh shit, you're about to kill me.
Yeah. So the Heart of Lurkin has made gods.
And then it, for some reason, made a mortal idiot that keeps regenning every, 100 years to go kill Dagoth.
The Nerevarine. So yeah, I guess the dwarves just screwed up when they tapped the Heart of Lurkin, and that brings up, we were talking about gods. We need to talk about gods that have happened since the Sundering as well. Because you have Sothosil, Vivek, and Almalexia, which are gods, though I'm pretty sure any normal god would backhand them because they're definitely watered down. But they were powerful enough to convince the Dark Elves or the Chimer that they were their gods, which pissed off Azura. Because the original elves that left the Aldmer, that became the Chimer, they traveled to Morrowind following Azura. The Daedric Prince, the Daedric Prince, which is crazy. Like I said, the Daedric Prince likes screwing with people, so. But they followed Azura. Some stuff happened between the Chimer and the Dwemer. The Chimer make a pact with the Dwemer because they were always fighting. Always fighting. The pact goes, falls through. They're fighting at Red Mountain. Kagrenak taps the heart. Poof, the wolf's gone. Chimer will go on, wait, what the crap is that? I mean, you gotta imagine. They were in the middle of a war, and then all of a sudden your entire opponent disappears.
Not only that, but just every dwarf on every continent.
Yeah. So
every single one, except for one that was just effing around in.
Yeah, he wasn't on Tamriel.
He was in a realm of oblivion, which we haven't had named.
Yeah, Yegar Tharn, I think was his name, right? I think so.
It was the War of the First Council.
Forgive me on my Morrowind lore. I was not old enough to play this game at
between
that point.
The Dwemer, or the Deep Elves, the Dwarves, and the Chimer. And it was the Great House of Dagoth.
Yeah, so bam, dwarves disappear. Dagoth discovers the Heart of Lurkin, taps it, becomes a god. Did it correctly.
Decided to try to make tools to use it.
Kagrenak did that. That's where you get Wraithguard, Sunder, and Keening. Those were literally... So, yeah, Wraithguard, Sunder, and Keening, the dagger that Arnie Elgain has in Skyrim, is literally, essentially the chisel that taps the heart of a god. Which is why, in Skyrim, when he tries to recreate it on a soul gem, he screws up and goes poof as well. Funny little story there. So, yeah. Dagoth taps it, becomes a god. Sothasil, Valvek, and Amalexia. All Chimer. Chimer are golden skinned. They are not ashen skinned like the Dark Elves are now. They three tap the heart of Lorcan. Poof, they become gods. They go back, convince the Chimer that they are their true gods. The Chimer start worshipping them three. Azura gets mad, curses the Chimer with ashen skin. They become the Dunmer, the Dark Elves. So that's why Dark Elves have ashen skin, ashen colored skin.
And for some reason, Vivek has both at the same time.
Well, Vivek doesn't have ashen skin. Him, Almalexia, and Solstill still are Chimer, technically. They were never changed because their powers protected them. That's why Almalexia is still golden, Solstill is still golden, and Vivek is half golden and half blue for whatever reason. I've never figured that one out.
I don't think we're ever going to figure that one out, honestly.
Yeah, man's just like, I like blue. Let's just dip half my body in it. But yeah, so those three or those four are some of the other gods that have been created. You have other iterations of gods. The Shezarine, which funny enough is my gamer tag on Xbox. I love that gamer tag. It was taken over here. But the Shezarine are reincarnations. Not really reincarnations. That's not a good word. They are personifications, I guess, of Lorcan. They're aspects of Lorcan. They get born whenever humanity needs a savior, essentially. So Tiber Septim was a Shezarine. One of the people who actually was Tiber Septim, but that's another, like I said, another story for another day. Was Shezarine. It's debated whether or not the Dragonborn, the last Dragonborn in Skyrim, was Shezarine. Very well could have been.
Definitely could have been.
Yeah. But there's a number of them. You can read the wiki page on it. There's been like 4 or 5 of them throughout history, so they're exceedingly rare. It's not like being Dragonborn where it's passed down. This is something completely outside of that realm. But a lot of the Dragonborn emperors are Shezarine because they're in that position to help people. But those are technically you're a minor deity at that point. And then you have your people who have attained Kim. And Kim is nuts. Kim is like your character becoming sentient in the game and then closing the game out because that's how they win. Kim is where you attain realization that you exist. I guess would be the easiest way to put it. It's
they
really
become fourth
crazy.
wall breaking, basically.
Yes, yeah. There's only been 2 or 3 characters that have ever attained Kim in the game. Tiber Septim being one of them, which is why he made himself a god. But Vivek was trying to accomplish Kim. I don't think he ever did before he died. He may have. But there was one other person who attained Kim, and I cannot remember who it is. It's Kim, Chim, not Kim. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that before people go looking it up eventually. But there was one other guy, and when he attained Kim, he just poofed out of existence. Like, he just ceased to be because he knew everything. I don't know. Kim is
that
nuts.
might actually. So we're talking about the Dwemer earlier, but that might have been all of them getting it at once.
That's one of the running theories, is they attained Kim and they poofed. Which is interesting because in some of the Dwarven ruins, you have Dwarven ghosts still. If they attained Kim, they wouldn't be ghosts. But some of them definitely could have. Kagranak being probably a prime suspect for attaining Kim, since he was the one that literally put hammer to Keening and tapped the heart. But Kim, in and of itself, is a type of godhood, so I just wanted to throw it in there. Other gods that have been created. There's been a couple. Like I said, RK, there's two conflicting stories for RK's creation. One of them is he's been around since the beginning. The other one is he was a mortal shopkeeper that was just really, really charitable in life, so the gods gave him a second chance as a god. Which is odd, shopkeeper becoming the god of life and death, but, you know, to each their own. Then you have gods over time that have lost power, gods that have gained power. Molag Bal being a prime suspect for having gained power over time because he created vampires, and then after that happens, he just, as more vampires are made, he gains more power, which makes sense. But other than that, I'm trying to think of any other outlier gods. You have minor gods, like in Glenumbra, the group dungeon, the Daedra that is running that pocket plane of Oblivion is technically not a Daedra, he's a minor god. But yeah, because when you that's what puts the distinction between being a Daedra and being just a normal Dremora, or being a prince and being or prince is above normal, but because a Daedra, your run-of-the-mill Daedra, your Scamps, your Zivali, your Kine Reeves, your Kine Marchers, your Clan Fears, all the hundreds of types of Daedra. What makes them Daedra is they serve a prince, or serve a minor god, or a major Daedric prince, or a minor Daedric prince. So in order to break away from that, you have to have Daedra under you, I guess, and have your own pocket realm of Oblivion. We know of 2 or 3. One in Glenumbra is one. Maelstrom Arena is one.
Yeah.
Few Nahit, I think is his name. The little bitty Daedra in there. He's a Daedric prince technically. Not nearly as powerful as the other ones, but he is still technically a Daedric prince.
And his general does refer to him as my prince, right?
Yeah, he does.
Correct. Yeah,
he does. Yeah, so we know of a couple. I guess those are technically gods too. They really don't have human followings, but they have enough power to set themselves apart from your run-of-the-mill Daedra.
Yeah.
I guess we could talk about the splits in some of the gods, like how the Wood Elves view Y'ffre as the main deity.
Yeah.
Because
we talked about the Chimer and the Dummer.
Yeah. So jumping around, I'll start with the Khajiit, because the Khajiit are kind of the easiest. The Khajiit pantheon looks difficult at first glance, and then you just realize they just slapped new names on all these gods. Wait a second. So the Khajiit pantheon is very close to the Tamrielic pantheon. It's just a lot of the names have been changed around. And they worship Masser and Secunda, which are the 2 moons. Because Khajiit, their shape is taken depending on what phase of the moon it is. So that's why you have Khajiit Rots, which are massive Khajiits, bipedal Khajiits. You have Cinch Rots, which are massive quadrupedal Khajiits. And then you have like your Alfiks, which are tiny, but they're still Khajiits. They're not house cats. Which is funny, because they can be mistaken for house cats if you don't know.
And people will literally walk up and pet said house cats, and they'll just be like, "Bro, stop! What are you doing?" And then be surprised at it.
Funny side note about Alfiks. Those are some of the most magically charged Khajiits. The little bitty house cat Khajiits. So I have some of the most powerful magics in.
There's actually a few house guests in this game, one of them I actually own, where most of them are mages, just because of that fact.
Yeah, so, I actually, a little side note for the role-playing side of it, I played a Khajiit. Man, it'd be like 4 or 5 years ago in Skyrim. I played as an alteration mage, and I played like he was a Alfik, but he used alteration magics to change his form into a normal Khajiit size, so he could do things. So, and what's crazy is they probably have the power to do that if they really wanted to and looked into it. But the little Alfiks are some of the most magically charged Khajiits. They're also a lot of the wisest. A lot of Alfiks are clan mothers. We meet a couple clan mothers in this game that are Alfiks. But yeah, so the Khajiit pantheon is very much just the Tamrielic pantheon, just with new names. Because they actually claim, I think it's Azura, they claim was their mother. Because they have like litter mates and all. Their creation story is very dramatized to fit the Khajiit way of life. Because they tell it like Lorcage was like the bad cat, and then there was cats that had the litters, and then the litters were like Azura and Boethia, and like they have all their Khajiit names. It's essentially the same stuff, just change the Khajiit perspective, which makes it simple once you really know the foundation of it. There's a couple though that you start getting out there, and I'm not going to talk about the Imperials or the Nords for the most part, or the Bretons, because they subscribe to the Tamrielic Pantheon, which is the one that a lot of these games operate on.
Yeah.
You have your 8 Divines, and that's it. 9 in Skyrim and Oblivion. Oblivion? Yeah, because Oblivion had the Knights of
Oblivion.
Yeah. But that's what they operate on. It's super
Skyrim's
simple.
the argument on the 9.
Yeah. Yeah. Which the only reason they're arguing that is because they're salty he attained godhood. But that's another story too for another day. But yeah, so you get to the not the dark elves, we are talking about the wood elves.
Yeah.
The wood elves,
Wood
the
elves,
Bosmer. Those are interesting because they were Aldmer as well, technically. But they went into the woods of Valenwood and discovered a god named Y'ffre. Y''FFRE, Y'ffre. And he is, as they say in this game, he is the singer and the storyteller and the god of the now. So like living in the present. And through what they call the primordial ooze, they were able to take shape into the wood elves from their primal forms. And they can revert to those primal forms, but it kills them in the process. But the Bosmer can revert to those primal forms in time of need. High King Borgrus in Skyrim really pissed off the Bosmer back in the first era or second era, and they initiated a wild hunt against him, which is where they take the form of the beasts again. And yeah, he got dead real fast. Because
I believe that was in the
hunt.
latter half of the First Age, where the Nords were basically trying to conquer all of Cyrodiil, and they said, oh, let's go F with these Wood Elves, this will be a nice time. Oh, why did they turn into gigantic monsters?
Yeah.
Hold on.
The Wood Elves cheated. But yeah, we actually go to High King Borgrus' tomb in Skyrim. A lot of people don't know that. That is the tomb where you get the jagged crown. That is High King Borgrus you take it off of. But yeah, he got wild hunted real fast. But after a wild hunt is complete, they don't turn back into wood elves. They devour each other until they're all dead. So it's not something the wood elves take on lightly. But yeah, they worship their god Y'ffre. He's like the nature god, and they have the Green Pact where they can't harm the trees and the green stuff of the woods. That's why wood elves have to import wood for their bows, because they can't use any wood from Valenwood because it's all sacred. But that is also why they're some of the best hunters and archers in all of Tamriel, because they only get their food from hunting. So you have to be good or you don't eat. Master huntsman, master marksman. There's quite a few of them that are pretty good at alchemy too, which sounds weird because of the Green Pact, but the Green Pact does not include mushrooms. So they use mushrooms and animal fats and stuff to do alchemy, which is really cool. So we got Y'ffre. The High Elven Pantheon is just renamed Aedra, essentially. High Elves still venerate Trinimac. They claim he never was degraded to Malakath. You get over and you look at the Red Guards, and the Red Guards kind of get odd. That's where things don't quite line up. So the Red Guards, the reason I did not include them at the beginning when Kind created mankind is because they were not created by Kind. We don't know who created the Red Guards, because the Red Guards came from a completely different continent.
And from different things we've heard of, sometimes we hear it, it's supposed to be like almost as big as Tamriel, and then sometimes it's just like, oh, it's just like 2 provinces. That's it for the size.
But that's why I theorize, like, when I hear it, I theorize that it also comes from the Dragon Break as well.
It could come from a Dragon Break because we've seen other races that have come from Yokuda. Yeah, Yokuda.
Yeah.
The Tesecti are one, the snake people. And we know the Tesecti are real because at one point, a Tesecti sat on the throne of Cyrodiil. Which is cool. So,
okay, you might be getting a little bit lore confused here.
No, it's Tesecti did. That's what started the...
They were not from Yakuta, those were from Akavir.
Akavir, not Yakuta. Both of them are from Akavir. I meant Akavir, not Yakuta.
Yakuta
That's what they call...
That's
what they call the desert.
Yakutans and the left-handed elves, or the bastard elves, is what they call them. Which, you might say I'm making that up, but no, they were literally called the bastard elves at one point.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but, no, yeah, you're right, it's Akavir, not Yakuta. I meant Akavir.
Yeah.
But the Tesecti come from Akavir. We know they're real because they tried to invade Tamriel at 1.2. Didn't go too well.
Same thing with the Kamal.
The Kamal are the Atmoran version of that, the Nordic version, essentially. Yeah, they're essentially the White Walkers.
Yeah, they are literally the White Walkers. You can't explain them. They're called the Demons of Kamal, which are basically just White Walkers.
They're ice demons, yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
Speaking of primordial races, the Capo Tongue.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones, the monkey people.
No,
are...
The Capo Tongue are the Khajiits of that continent.
Yeah, they're monkey people.
And they're notable for the fact that their king may or may not have turned into a dragon.
Right.
Okay,
Capo
I'm thinking of someone else. The Capo Tongue are the tiger people, you're correct.
Yeah.
Hold
and
up.
then the Tang Mo are the...
That's what they are.
Are the monkey
Tang
people.
Mo. Yeah, the Tang Mo, that's the sad people, too, because they get picked on.
They
but
get
the Tang Mo are
but they
master
still
martial
beat
artists.
the shit out of people.
Yeah, the Tang Mo are master martial artists, which is really cool. I wish they would add some of the martial arts stuff to one of these games. Because the Khajiit even have... Yeah, because the Khajiit even have unarmed fighting styles. You have the Whispering Fang and the Coiling Serpent and like all that stuff that we learned from going to elsewhere. Like that style of fighting is very popular. The bow staff or the unarmed. But yeah, to the Redguard gods, which is where all this started. You have their chief deity, which is called Tall Papa. Exactly how it sounds, Tall Papa. He is the creator of everything. And then you have Morwa, Leki. What are some other ones that are Redguard? Morwa, Leki. 2 seconds. I'm gonna pull up the wiki. I'm not too proud to say I'm pulling up the wiki for this one because I don't know Redguard lore that much. I just know they're freaking nuts and really cool.
Oh, their lore is really
annoying. Leki, Tall Papa, the Hunding, which is their version of the Shezarine, the Hunding, the Make Way god. He inhabits a person and he makes way for the Redguards. Frandar Hunding was a hence the last name. It's spelt different, but he was a Hunding. He was a waymaker for his people. Then you have Satakal, which is essentially their World Eater Serpent. He coils the Mundus, and when it's time for everything to be over, he will devour it once again. So their pantheon is pretty small compared to the other ones. I would like to jump back real quick, though, to the Khajiit pantheon, because I missed a couple interesting ones. And this is an instance of another moral gaining godhood. You have Raijin. Raijin gained godhood. He stole godhood. He was a thief. Was blessed by Nocturnal with a ring the Ring of the Khajiit, which is a Daedric artifact we have not seen since Morrowind, I believe. The Ring of the Khajiit, the Bow of Shadows he also had, I believe. Bow of Shadows we hadn't seen since Morrowind until we got Skyrim Anniversary Edition. They put it in. He was a thief. He was incredibly good. Eventually, he ascended to godhood, and the Khajiit venerate him as well. Then you have the Riddlethar, which is another Khajiit god. The Bondar, which is a mischief god that the Khajiit worship, I guess, technically. I don't know if they worship him more than they just respect him. And then you have other things that people revere as gods, like the Hist. Though they are not technically gods, I guess, we can make an argument for them. Another one is the Ebonarm, which is mostly venerated by Red Guards. But though we don't know what the Ebonarm is...
And we really have not seen lore about that.
Yeah, we don't know much on
the
Ebonarm.
Ebonarm was basically their god of war.
Yes.
But it was more of a fight war if you have to god. We haven't seen anything about him since... Jesus. 2. Daggerfall.
Fun fact, it's theorized, obviously we can't confirm this, that the Ebony Warrior in Skyrim is a aspect of Ebonarm. Which could make sense. I mean, he's clad in ebony armor like Ebonarm is said to be. He is a head and shoulders taller than everyone in the game. He's an incredibly skilled martial fighter. The only thing that doesn't give credence to that, and this could have just been a voice line mistake, is he talks about going to Sovngarde. The Ebonarm wouldn't talk about that. He would talk about going to the Far Shores, which is the Redguard Sovngarde, the Far Shores. But yeah, that's just a cool little thing. But yeah, we don't know a whole lot about Ebonarm. We just know that he was essentially a god of war. Saint Alessia was venerated by a cult for some time, but she's not a god. She was mortal. Very important mortal that we'll probably have to get into in a couple weeks, but she was not a god.
She was basically just the person who decided to kill an entire kingdom of elves.
Yeah. And then, like I said, sure. I'm saving my favorite one for last. We could talk about the Nedic religion real quick, the old ways, the totem gods.
Oh, yeah.
Which are just gods we know reflavored. Each god is hooked up to a totem animal, essentially. Then you get other Nordic gods, which we know exist from Sovngarde, from going to Sovngarde and Skyrim, like Sun, the guy who guards the Whalebone Bridge, that aren't really venerated anymore, but they're still there. So the Nordic old totem gods were what the Nords used to worship before they were kind of adopted into the imperialistic way of worship. There are still Nords who worship the totem gods. Even in Skyrim, there's one. You run into him way out in a cabin in the middle of the woods. I cannot remember what his name is for the life of me. But it's an old man. And he talks about the sacred trials of the old gods, and you take on Kine, not Kinnereth, Kine's sacred trials. Because Kine in the old totem gods is the hawk. Because she's the goddess of the wind and of the traveler. Then you have Sun, which is depicted as a bear. He was essentially a warrior god. Essentially a precursor to Stendar. Sun and Stune are very similar. Sun... yeah, he's the Nordic god of trial against adversary. So, in some ways, he even lines up with Malakath. Where, you fight people who fight you, essentially. Punch them in the face. And then you have Stun, Stuhn, which is the Nordic equivalent of Stendar. I can't remember what he's depicted as. But yeah, you have your old totem gods. The hawk. The owl is Junal, which is just Julianos. Repackaged. The whale, I believe, is Shore. Do not quote me on that. I do believe it is. Then you have Sun, Tsun, is the bear. Stune, I'm not sure what they depict Stune as. Yeah, that's the old totem gods essentially, which is a legitimate religion in this world because it still is worshiping the same gods that exist, just repackaged. Uh, the imperialistic pantheon that a lot of people know is just repackaged from all the other religions and made more digestible for the common person. That's what the Imperials did with it. The last one I want to talk about, and then
They really only did that because of the fact they knew they were going to have elves under their heels, so they just said, alright, some things we don't need. Look over at Shore. Put him in a box.
yeah, and in a lot of the elves at that time, the aliens that were left, which were not many because a lot of them got dead real fast, they were remnants of the few alien tribes that worshipped the more benevolent Daedra, because a lot of the aliens worship Daedra. The only aliens, to my knowledge, that survived Saint Alessia and the Slave Uprising, which was powered by Akatosh, was the ones that worship Meridia. And that's because Meridia, at one point, surprise, was an Aedra. She was an Aedra at one point, even though she's a Daedra now. So that's why I believe Meridia has a lot more juice than what people give her credit for, too. Because even though the Aedra have lent their power, the Aedra are still more powerful than the Daedra. They've shown it time and time again. And it's shown in this game, in the very last cutscene, so spoilers if you haven't finished this, almost 10-year game at this point? I think it's like, or on like year 7 or 8. When you go defeat Molag Bal, defeat him, you cannot kill him because he is a Daedra. There are very, very, very crazy rules for actually killing the gods like that. Marco tries it, doesn't work out for him, you should ask him. When you kill Molag Bal, quote-unquote, displace him, Meridia pulls you to the Colored Rings, which is her realm of oblivion, and she talks with you, and she gets your soul back, and then Molag Bal appears, talks to you, and then Meridia backhands him out of her realm. Like, I know it was her realm, and he had just got beaten by you, but it's shown that the other Daedra sometimes are afraid of her, even when they're at their full power. So, she probably has a lot more power than you think as well. The one I wanted to say for last, though, personally is my favorite, because being a Nord person, I love Nordic lore. I cannot wait for us to have a Nordic lore talk night, because there's so much good stuff to get into with the Nords. Is the god that the Skald venerate. The Skald being a sect of Nords that live on northern Solstheim. A very, very ancient tribe of Nords. Predates the Atmorans coming back with Ysgramor. They've been on Tamriel since the beginning. Their people have. So they are Nords, but in a very much similar way, they're not Nords. They're proto-Nords. But they just look like normal Nords. They worship a being called the Allmaker, which is very, very reminiscent of monotheistic religions in the real world. They have one god, and one bad god. They have the Allmaker and the Adversary. And they know the other gods exist. Like, they have a lot of run-ins with Hermaeus Mora. They don't like Hermaeus Mora, but they only worship and venerate the Allmaker as the true god. To them, he created everything. When you die, you go back to him and you are reincarnated. So it is a monotheistic reincarnation religion, which is very odd, but kind of cool. But yeah, that's kind of the last. And he's the Allmaker, a very generalistic name, but kind of a cool break from the polytheism you see across most of Tamriel. Seeing a monotheistic religion, especially when the other gods are so prevalent, and evidence for them is very prevalent in the world. They still only will worship one, being the Allmaker. So yeah. Now that's kind of what I got on all this Dawn era talking about the gods and stuff. Because this talking about the gods, it really sets up discussion for everything else. Because everything stems from that conflict in the Dawn era. because all your races come from the Dawn era, all your religions come from the Dawn era. A lot of artifacts, come from the Dawn era as well. Voldenrung comes from the Dawn era. A lot of time-altering artifacts. Elder Scrolls get created somewhere in there. Those are nuts. I don't even know how to start discussing Elder Scrolls because those are very.
That might be a couple episode in to get.
That will take about an hour. The only thing I can say about Elder Scrolls are the best theory that we have for what they are is where if you open it up and you see the entire thing of the Elder Scroll, it looks very much like a star map. It could be a snapshot from when the universe was being made.
Yeah.
So you can see into any timeline. Because what you use those for is seeing the future 9 times out of 10.
Yes, that is very correct. The Moth Priests say whenever you open an Elder Scroll, and this is why a lot of Moth Priests go blind or crazy, you see every possible future and every possible past. So, that's the best assumption we have on those, but Elder Scrolls get crazy because we don't know who created them, when they were created. We just know they're here. And they are a very, very valuable tool. And their power seems to be pretty limitless. Because they've done everything from casting a god adrift on time, being Alduin, to simply telling you how to proceed so you could do the best stuff possible moving forward, like with Lorcan, not with Lorcan, with Harkin in the Dawnguard DLC. That's how he got his prophecy back in the first era, when he opened that Elder Scroll, or had that Elder Scroll prophecy read to him about the bow of Ariel. So their application seems pretty unlimited. So I guess in a way you could say the Elder Scrolls themselves could be kind of a type of god, but not in a sense that they are gods, like the actual gods in Daedra and stuff. So, but yeah, it's all completely simple, totally easy. We could have done that in 5 minutes, all that,
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah. But I guess on my end, what I'm going to wrap it up with saying is it's a very jumbled, unorganized mess that gets really simple when you get your baseline. If you can compare everything back to that baseline, a lot of the pantheons bounce off of that baseline somewhere.
Oh yeah. It's like, especially with the Dragon Break and all that at the beginning, it helps align the fact that not everyone will have it right from their side, but if you blend all of them together pretty much, that you get a complete story out of the telling.
That's kind of why I feel so fascinated about this lore, is because of the fact that there is no wrong or right side 9 times out of 10.
It seems the only place that is undebatable is that it started with a new Padme. That your starting point has to be the same.
Yeah, and that's for the main races that you have pre-Dragon Break.
Yeah, well, because a new Padme is consistent above both the men side of telling the story and the elven side of story. It's after that it starts getting crazy. But you start with the 2. That's the same across all of them. So, except for the skull, but like I said, monotheism kind of odd for this game, but to each their own. But yeah,
on that note,
it's been a good discussion. I haven't brushed off that lore in a long time. It's not something that I go around and talk to people in public about. And
it'd probably be weird to talk to somebody in public.
And being a pastor myself, I really can't preach that from a pulpit on Sunday morning. I might be called a heretic and lose my ordination.
Hey, you Christian! So... You want to know about all these gods?
Yeah. So. Yeah.
So on that note, we will probably end our ESO discussion night. We will send it off to... Oh.